Namaste and welcome to another edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. I'm Roshan Karyappa. I have Nirav Kanodra as well with me. And hopefully we'll be joined shortly by Prasanna Vishwanathan as well to discuss the news and events of the week that was. And what a week. I mean, we have a lot to discuss. The GST collections hit an all-time high in March. The US Deputy National Security Advisor Daleep Singh had a few comments on India. The Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar's exchange with his counterpart Liz Truss from Britain. And of course, we had the India-Australia Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement as well. So a lot to discuss. Hey, Nirav, how's it going?
All good, all good. Nice weekend. The weather's getting too hot.
Yeah, but been following the IPL?
Yeah, unfortunately. I'm a Mumbai supporter, 2 games lost.
Okay, yeah. So Bangalore supporters have long given up. I mean, even though they're nursing some hopes.
I'm joining you, yeah.
Even though they're nursing some hopes for this year, right? So, yeah, plenty to discuss. Let's get started with the bit on GST collections. GST collections have hit an all-time high in March with total collections coming up to 1.42 lakh crore. The gross GST collection in March 2022 reached the earlier record of 1.40 lakh crore. It is the highest ever since the implementation of the new tax system. In a statement, the Ministry of Finance said the revenues for March are 15% higher than the GST revenues in the same month last year and 46% higher than the GST revenues in March 2020. The average monthly gross GST collection for the last quarter of FY22 has been 1.38 lakh crore rupees. Nirav, this is excellent, right? I mean, obviously the government can use all of this money.
Yes. So actually, India earlier, people used to complain that India did not have good data quality on, like, say, GDP, inflation, etc. So I think the GST number, right, is the highest quality data because it happens every month, and 2, that it is actual cash payments, right? So businesses are making money and they're paying out. So I think pre-COVID, we were running at about 1 lakh crore number was a good number. And post-COVID, kind of 2 years was like a little bit of too much noise with a collapse in the economy, then a quick rebound. But I think, 1.3 lakh crore onwards is like a good number. So that means we've been growing nominally over this period of time. Obviously, the GST represents one section of the economy. So, for example, agriculture is not a part of GST. Fuel taxes or alcohol taxes are not a part. A lot of the, say, essentials are actually exempt from any GST. So, obviously, this shows one particular section of the economy, but it's a very good number to see. It is timely data collection, and maybe every March you see a bump up because there's a financial year end closing, etc. So maybe there's a bump up, but I would say like a number 1.3 lakh crore to 1.4 lakh crore is always is a nice number. That means the economy is doing all fine. Second thing is, from 1st of April, so this year, there is no compensation for states on the GST collections. So earlier, from the old regime where you had VAT and you had state sales tax, etc., excise duty, there was a compensation given for states that nominally it would increase. So what I foresee happening is the states which are doing a little bit better per capita, so I would put like Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. These 4 are kind of the stellar states. They will have a little more excess revenue from the state portion of the GST, and they will be able to spend better. And this probably, hopefully, gets into a virtuous cycle. Maybe other states will realize that, say, what is going wrong, and they will try and be a little more business friendly, which eventually leads to higher tax collections. And if that tax collection is respent on like welfare and those kind of things, so it's a positive. So I think on the whole, this is a positive number. It's a good trend. And this is like, I would say, the canary in the coal mine. If this number dips, it tells you something is wrong, right? So that's the best indicator to look at, in my opinion.
Yeah. Harsh Madhusudan, who is also an eminent Bharatvaarta guest as well, had a good article in Hindu Business Line, I think, called Big Gains for Small Firms, where he talks about, how some of the tax burden is reduced on MSMEs and they have more access to structured finance because of this and everything. Definitely definitely a good article to check out. And there was some controversy with a lot of these crypto exchanges being pulled up for the tax evasion on the GST front. I think something like close to about 100 crores of penalty, fine, interest, everything was collected, I think, from the top 10 or 11 exchanges, right? Yeah. So interesting times. Moving on, the US Deputy National Security Advisor, Daleep Singh, drew flack over the week due to his comments on India Russia relations. He is considered a key architect of US actions against Russia and was in India last week to discuss ways of improving Indo US economic cooperation. He stated that the US doesn't want to see, to quote, a rapid acceleration in India's imports from Russia of energy and other commodities prohibited by global sanctions. Moreover, he cautioned India against expecting Russia to come to the country's defense if China were to violate India's border. He also said that he was, to quote, very keen for all countries to not prop up the ruble and not attempt to undermine the dollar based financial system. Well, I mean, we have some big brother like comments, right? What do you have to say?
So see, first, like I'll go to his comment that Russia won't come helping India, right? So we had Chinese transgressions in Galwan and near Sikkim, Doklam in the last few years, right? At that time, neither Russia nor US, no one came to support us openly, right? So that is one thing. So we have to be sure that, okay, if you say that, oh, Russia won't come supporting us, what can you offer? Second thing is that a lot of our arms, ammunition, and a lot of spare parts for arms are all coming from Russia. So one is, yes, we need to move on and we need to be a lot more self-sufficient or Atmanirbhar on our defense equipment and defense capabilities. But see, whenever actual war happens, you use up a lot of ammunition, you need a lot of spares, and suddenly you need to ramp up that production. And that will only be available where all the designs, everything is already available in Russia, right? So we would need a lot more of that. So we need to have a balancing act. See, obviously, Russian economy is half our size. US economy is way bigger. It's a way, like, we have a lot more cultural ties with the US. We have a lot of people of Indian origin or overseas citizens of India residing there, a lot of NRIs residing there. So absolutely we need to balance. But the thing is, India needs to maintain its sovereignty, and India needs to kind of say that, see, we need to do what is best for Indians. See, there are no permanent friends, there are no permanent enemies, there are only permanent interests, right? So yes, US is used to being like the big brother, but given you can't be completely reliant on someone. See what has happened in Afghanistan, or see what has happened even in Ukraine, where US said, oh, we'll provide you some arms and equipment, but they're not sending soldiers on the ground. So I think US continues to import uranium from Russia, Europe continues to import gas from Russia and oil and gas, right? So these kind of things are, I would say, a bit hypocritical. Yes, obviously, US being a lot more powerful ally, we need to draw like a fine line. You don't want to be saying something a little too aggressive and hitting back at them, but we need to see that what is our position. And even if, say, for example, India might use rupee ruble conversion to buy oil from Russia, right? I think that is a good thing. See, there has been too much dominance of one. Like, see, post COVID, everybody has realized you cannot have just one supplier. So that was China. India cannot just have one supplier for military equipment. That's Russia. We cannot just use like one currency for all global transactions, because your accounts could be frozen or you could be sanctioned. So that is the US. So we need a balance. I think, see, these things are going to happen, and India needs to say that at the margin, if we do buy a little more oil from there, or if we use rupees to buy oil, etc., it's in our favor. If you tell us not to do that, what else can you offer that we don't do that, right? And I think there is a part of diplomacy. Obviously, I'm not qualified. This is just, but I think Jai Shankar and team, everyone is doing a fantastic job, right? So I think, see, Daleep Singh is talking from his viewpoint. You can clearly see that that Pax Americana is dead. That US can't dictate terms on rest of the world, but we need to play our cards well to get the best what is for India. So I think that's about it.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, and this seems to be a common theme emerging in all interactions with the West, actually, right? Like the exchange with the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and the UK Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. In response to India buying crude oil from Russia, Mr. Jaishankar stated that India gets the bulk of our energy supplies from the Middle East, with Russian energy sources, the resources making up just a few percentage points of India's imports. Sorry. He also pointed out that the major buyers of oil and gas from Russia were from Europe, with the continent buying 15% more oil and gas from Russia in March than previous months. He also called the media attention on our country buying crude as a campaign against India, stating that it is natural for countries to go out and look for good deals in the global market, given the rising prices. Neerav, this was a stellar exchange, right? I mean, I
Oh yeah,
really like,
absolutely. So I think,
Minister Jaishankar. Yeah.
so see, Minister Jaishankar, he's showing like India has a spine, right? Every exchange, I think he's been a statesman, and he's come out there and like he said very clearly that and India is standing up for itself. See, we need to behave. So a lot of people in the older generation, etc., are a little bit, self-effacing, and they are not as confident, etc. And this was also like a whole kind of regime where India was a poor country. Now it's a lower middle income country. We are like the fifth biggest economy. As much as we need the West also needs India, right? Obviously, we are still small enough, and we may not have as much leverage, but we are behaving as if we are part of the big boys club. So that is very important. We've stated clearly, and we've said, see, there is economics behind it. So what if India, actually, to be fair, a lot of the Indian refineries are not even calibrated to Russian oil, because the kind of quality of input, the kind of mixture of crude that there is, it is difficult to just replace it overnight. You need to shut down the refinery, recalibrate the operating mode, and then, so maybe they buy a little more. Maybe they blend it with the existing imports that we have from Middle East and from the US, right? So uh, this is a very great exchange, and Jaishankar has actually shown his cards. Let's see, we will do what is best for ourselves, and he's calling out the double speak of Europe. So Europe has maybe imported 15% more, is because they're storing up. Because what if supplies are disrupted?
Yeah,
And from 1st
exactly.
of April, they have to pay in rubles, not in euros, to get Russian oil and gas. So I think that's what they were probably stocking up before that, right? So I think that's what it is. It's a great thing that India is standing up for itself, and the duty of the Indian government is to its own citizens.
Yeah.
And so, absolutely, if we can get a good deal on energy, and we need to play like a delicate balancing act. See, as much as US needs India as a part of the Quad. UK has broken off from EU and wants to develop better trade relationships with India, and they need to understand that we are not going to be negotiating from a point of weakness. We try to be equals. Obviously, we are weaker. So yes, we are not as, we don't have the same leverage that they have, but that doesn't mean that India can be taken for granted, right? So I think it's a very good thing. Obviously, you don't have to overplay the hand, and without being rude, without being abrasive, confidently stating what you want and confidently stating that you would do what's best for yourself is a fantastic thing. So I think this is a negotiating tactic as well. And absolutely kudos to Jaishankar. I think he's one
Yeah.
of the best
It's
performing
amazing.
ministers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, for sure. I mean, there is very little rhetoric as such, and when he uses it, I mean, it uses it to very good effect. If anything, to buttress the facts as such, right? I mean, he's amazing that way. He lays out all of the facts and principles, very very simple, easy to understand manner, and yeah, I mean, considering that I don't know what Britain's per capita is probably 20 times India, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah. But
yeah.
the economy is
So
now probably the same. We
probably
are
the same.
both
Yeah.
similar sized economy.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, we have to look out for the best interests of the Indian people than worry about geopolitics and everything. Somehow feels that when there is real politics from our end, I mean, the West has to revert to some kind of an
Yeah,
emotional
absolutely.
blackmail on
So
principles and
I think
whatnot.
I would like to add a couple of things, right? So similarly in the UK, their finance minister, equivalent of finance minister, what they call the treasury secretary, Rishi Sunak, the person of Indian origin, married to Akshata Murthy, Narayan Murthy's daughter. And he was being quizzed that his wife owned a company. She's a shareholder, but not the controlling shareholder, and nor is she actually operating the company, which was dealing with Russia and had close links with Russia. And so Infosys has 260,000 employees, of which 100 were there in Russia. Bulk of its revenues actually come from the US and a little bit from Europe and UK.
Yeah.
And they have way more employees. I think they have like 20 or 1,000 employees in the US working on projects. So obviously, if at all you would call it like an American company where bulk of its revenue comes from, a lot of their profits are there. So, and then he was being like dragged on coals on this part. And I think there has been news that Infosys decided to shut its Russia operations because it's like a really minor thing. It's a rounding error, right? It won't even show up in their bottom line. But this is what is being used, and all these emotional tactics are being used. But here, obviously, Rishi Sunak is a British citizen. He has to serve, and he's a part of the British government. He has to serve what is best for Britain. But Akshata Murthy is a private citizen, and her father, Narayan Murthy, is not even the CEO anymore. And he's just a controlling, like he's not even a controlling shareholder, right? So he's on the board. And these kind of things are like a business decision. And so absolutely. And it is hypocrisy while the West is still buying oil and gas from Russia.
Yeah.
So I think this has to be called out. And I think Jaishankar has done a great job in communication.
Yeah.
So that's that thing as well.
Yeah. No, there was like tabloid journalism at its worst, right? I mean, it was laughable. I mean, they had this picture of Narayan Murthy shaking hands with Vladimir Putin, and then they built the entire story around that, right? Pretty crazy. Well, moving on, Imran Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, has yet again emerged in the limelight, this time with comments on India. Ahead of a no-trust motion against him, Mr. Khan stated that a powerful country supporting India is angry with Pakistan for his visit to Russia. He also stated that the powerful country is supporting India, even though we import oil from Russia. He also said taking independent decisions with the interests of a nation in mind was extremely important rather than submitting to the will of other countries in exchange for foreign aid. Khan has been claiming that the opposition's no confidence motion against him was the result of a foreign conspiracy because of his independent foreign policy. When we move on from one funny story to another, right? What has Imran Khan gotten himself to now?
Yeah. So I think, this is sometimes everyone knows it, that the ones calling the shots are the army, right, in Pakistan. And Imran Khan was propped up by the army because they felt that he was useful to them at that point in time. He gave a nice modern face. He's a very popular person apart from, so he's like the biggest cricketing icon, a very big philanthropist, like he built a cancer hospital. So he was like what people would call like a useful idiot. I think Lenin probably coined that term. He was a useful idiot which served their purpose, right? And now Imran Khan kind of against their own wishes, army's wishes, he went and visited Russia. So see, Imran is trying to rebalance the power support. US has kind of, after the Afghanistan pullout, US is not that interested in Pakistan as an ally. China is their permanent ally, and he was trying to rebalance probably with Russia. I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe there is merit to it or whatever. That's their decision. So what has happened is that the army has not liked it. And army has very good contacts with the US. A lot of the coordination in the war in Afghanistan was Pakistani army helping the US army. So I think they have kind of been upset. So obviously US is upset with everybody who's kind of dealing with Russia, but US needs India more right now than they need Pakistan. Yeah. So yes, obviously the powerful country Imran Khan is hinting at Pakistan, at the US, and what has happened is he is facing like a no confidence motion, and it's a bit of a turmoil, right? So he is doing what probably benefits himself, and rightly so. And he's kind of giving an example of India, and this is like really rare. In like my whole life, I've never seen a Pakistani leader talking favorably about India or that India is doing something well. So while it may while it is true that India has more leverage, I think that's their domestic problem. They need to sort it out. And I think he's trying and scampering to retain control, right? It is like a very sad thing for the citizens of Pakistan, where kind of unelected representatives like the army have much bigger control over their country's policy and economy. So it is what it is. Uh, Imran Khan is just trying to garner some sympathy or some this thing. It also probably reflects what the average Pakistani thinks about India now. Like while earlier they used to consider India as like a lesser developed or a poorer country, now they're seeing that India has a little more spine, a little more powerful. So over the last 30, 40 years, this actual transition has happened. So I think that's about it. To be fair, Pakistan, while being our neighbor, is really like 1/7 our economy, and we should not be talking too much about them. It doesn't, we have hardly any trade. We need to move on. They might be our neighbor, but like it's best to kind of ignore them or ignore their comments.
Yeah. No, and he also has a knack of saying things like this once a while, I think. So I think earlier, a few months back, he had said something to the effect of Prime Minister Modi has very strong leadership or something like that. Right. So well, okay. Hope his troubles sort itself out. In some good news, India and Australia have signed a comprehensive free trade agreement termed as the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement. It covers almost all the tariff lines dealt in by India and Australia. These include areas such as trade in goods and services, technical barriers to trade, customs procedures, pharmaceutical products, and cooperation in other areas. India will benefit from preferential market access provided by Australia on 100% of its tariff lines. Some industries that can benefit from this include jewelry, textiles, leather, footwear, food and agricultural products, medical devices, and automobiles. From Australia's side, industries such as coal, mineral ore, and wines will benefit. Australia has offered wide-ranging commitments in 135 subsectors and marked India as a most favored nation in 120 subsectors, which cover India's areas of interest such as education, health, audiovisual, and IT. Some interesting additions include special quota for chefs and yoga teachers and work and holiday visa arrangement for young professionals. So we saw the trade agreement with UAE signed earlier, right? Now this is 2 for 2 in less than a year.
Yes. I think, see, the Indian economy is having its like reforms 2.0. So like 1991 was like one big kick. I think the seeds were sown in 1980s when like Maruti and Hero Honda or Honda came to India to set up Hero Honda, etc. And so we are seeing this second part, right? Bharatvaarta podcast has spoken a lot about PLI, semiconductors, etc. But we can only be an export powerhouse if we have FTAs in place. So I think this is a great one. India actually had a little more leverage because we've exempted like a few agri products which Australia can export to us without tariffs. So those were like dairy, some other agri goods, specifically chickpeas, which I think Australia grows a lot. I wasn't aware of it. So one good thing to rejoice is Australian wines are fantastic. So yes, they will be cheaper in India. But the second thing is what we expect on exports today is what India exports the most, which is say probably gems and jewelry, auto parts and pharmaceuticals. But we also have PLI set up in a lot of other industries as well, right? So maybe this gives a little bit of demand for say textiles, say for semiconductor parts and electronic equipment, right? India now is a very large mobile phone manufacturer. So there are a few good things. One is Australia wants to diversify away from China where it buys bulk of its. So Australian trade, if you really look at it, is negligible with rest of the world. It supplies China with iron ore, coking coal, and other raw materials, other metals, and in return it buys all manufactured goods from China, right? So they want to diversify away. India is seen as a very good ally. Second thing, it's very important on the timing. It's a comprehensive FTA and not like an small mini FTA with in principle some which to add. This is very critical because Australia is going for elections in May, and Prime Minister Scott Morrison may or may not win. So I'm not taking sides on Australian politics, but his government rushed through to get this done before the next government is formed, because then it would be either starting from scratch or traditionally the Labour Party has been a little more pro-China versus the Liberal Party, where Scott Morrison has been a little bit more pro-India in the recent years. So they have rushed this through, and this has been signed. So that's a fantastic thing. I think that's helps India as well. And finally, as like China is slowing down, and as like its over construction or the property sector is slowing down, so they would need less steel and they would need less uh, coking coal. India has a lot of thermal coal for power plants, but India does not have coking coal, which is used in steel manufacturing. So I think India was already importing from Australia, and Indians were paying higher duties. Now we'll be paying a little bit lower duties, so it helps the consumer overall, right? So I think this is great. We've signed deals with UAE. Now we've signed deals with Australia. So there's a learning curve for the Ministry of Commerce. With Piyush Goyal, another very high performing minister, we have deals in pipelines with say Saudi Arabia, with Israel. So they want to have an Indo-Abrahamic corridor. We have a deal in the pipeline with the UK, which kind of is going through choppy waters because of this whole Ukraine thing. But this gives us the template, right? That okay, we all learn like how do you negotiate, how do you sign a contract, how do you protect your own interests and see what is mutually beneficial. So I think India, instead of uh, like this is like the China moment for India, I feel. China had a very big moment in 2000, 2001, where it joined the WTO and kind of opened up to trade with the whole world. What India is doing is piecemeal, going one by one. Uh, One of the things is India has a few constraints where opening up agriculture would be very much against Indian interests, especially because 65% or 50 to 65% of our population is earning livelihood there, right? We cannot have that big a shock. We couldn't even pass some laws on agriculture which are actually beneficial to it. So there's a bit of stasis there. So India doesn't have that degree of freedom, but we are trying and working around it. And I think so coupled with the PLI schemes and with these FTAs, India might actually have a trade surplus in goods or reach a trade balance in goods. We always had a trade surplus in services, but we could be the export powerhouse. And the world wants to diversify away from China. So I think India is the only country with this size, this scale, which can offer an alternative. So that's what it is. It's a great, great sign, and hope there'll be like many more of such FTAs to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot more we can talk about, perhaps on a separate episode itself on the FTAs, right? Ones that have been signed and the ones that are in the pipeline might likely happen during the course of the year. All right. So that with that, we come to the end of a short weekly. Right. Thank you so much, Nirav. It was insightful as always. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we have a couple of episodes coming out this week. We'll let you know on our social media channels. Share and subscribe, all of the good stuff. Thank you again, and see you next week.